Welcome to Muskegon Rising, a community service project of the Muskegon Rotary Club. Our purpose is to create lasting positive change. We've been doing that here since 1916. So, let's get started.
Hello, listeners. I am pleased to be here today with the illustrious Scott Speck, who is the music director for the West Michigan Symphony. And Scott Speck has been with the West Michigan Symphony, I believe, for 22 years. And Scott's going to tell us a little bit about his career and really take us behind the curtain, so to speak, with the orchestra. So I'm thrilled to be here talking to Scott. So hope you enjoy our conversation. Good morning, Scott.
Good morning, Emma.
How are
Great to be
you?
with you. I'm great. Thank you.
Did you just fly in today, or have you been here?
I just drove in from Chicago yesterday.
Okay, fantastic.
And I'm here for the week. And I have to say that I don't usually do too many morning events. You know, we showbiz people have to be at our best at 10 p.m., right? So,
right.
And then very often then you have dinner after that and go to bed maybe at 1 or later. And so, the fact that I'm doing this with you in the morning just shows how much I think of you.
Oh, well, thank you, Scott. I'm pleased to hear that. And for our listeners, we're recording this in the morning, so we have the pleasure of seeing Scott's face bright and early, or I have the pleasure. So I would love, just, Scott, tell us a little bit. I mean, you're a music director, you're a conductor, you've conducted and been on stages all over the world. I don't know that that's a career that a lot of people maybe know. How do you fall into that, or how do you work into that?
Right, and I sure wouldn't recommend it for anybody. It's an incredibly difficult path to have a successful career as a music director or a conductor. I will say that growing up, I grew up right outside of Boston in Belmont, Massachusetts, and with two extremely curious and intelligent and fun parents. And I think they instilled in me a love for knowledge and a love for learning of all kinds. And it was really hard to narrow down what it was that I wanted to do. But I think it was in sixth grade, I heard a recording of classical music, and I just got the bug. And I knew that whatever I ended up doing, classical music was going to be part of it. But it still wasn't clear that that's what I was going to major in college, for example. But I did. So I went to Yale undergraduate, and I did major in music. I didn't choose my major until senior year.
Okay.
That's how interested I was in
Other
everything.
things, yeah, languages I know particularly also, right?
Yeah, but also political science and history and science and all kinds of things. And even at the end of my senior year, it wasn't completely clear that I'd be going into music, because my other great love is movies. I wanted to be a movie director.
I do recall you saying that before, yes.
Growing up, I used to make these Super 8 movies, and I even made one as an independent study project that I got a whole course credit for in high school and spent a semester on, and even wrote the music for, by the way, and had a local symphony orchestra play it and put that in the background.
So you're a composer too?
Well, part of me also wanted to be a composer. My hero was John Williams.
Oh, yes,
and I wanted to write just like John Williams. But what I found is that in writing for this small movie in college, it took me 5 months to write 20 minutes of music. And generally, you have to write, 2 hours of music in 2 weeks. And in the movie biz, there was no way I could do that. And I finally determined that I'm better off conducting other people's masterpieces.
Right, others.
At the end of college, there were two things that I had applied for. One of them was called the Assistant Director's Training Program, where you go to LA and you shadow some famous movie director and you learn all about the business for 2 years, and it's all completely subsidized. And then the other thing I applied for was a Fulbright scholarship to study music in Germany. And it's as simple as I didn't get one and I got the other.
It set you on the path.
It set me on that path. It was like a fork in the road at that point. I went to Germany. Now, I had already studied music as a kid. I studied piano and I studied cello during college, and I had sung in choruses, and I had taken music theory classes and music history and orchestration and composition. So, I had music under my belt to a certain extent, although you never master music in your whole life. But I ended up going on that path and spending 2 years in Berlin. And that's what really set me on the road to being a conductor.
Oh, my gosh. So where was your first job, so to speak, once you were on that path and that was what you were going to do?
Yeah, that's right. Well, after spending 2 years in Berlin, let me just first say that I had the incredible good fortune while I was there to join the chorus of the Berlin Philharmonic Orchestra, which I considered then and now to be the greatest orchestra in the world. And so I had the opportunity to just stand right behind them and watch, look face to face at every guest conductor that we had, and these were the greatest in the world, showing the orchestra what they wanted. And even more of an impression was watching and listening to the orchestra, the way they responded, because they play like a single-celled organism. They're so connected. Their nervous systems from one side of the stage to the other, and when they breathe, it's like there's a change of atmospheric pressure in the room. It's like everybody inhales at once, and they seem to levitate before they play. And the sound that they make is so rich and full and golden. I always then, from that point on, had all of that in my mind as a picture of what the ideal orchestra would be, and have always tried to instill those qualities in any orchestra I work with. But then I went to California and got a master's degree at the University of Southern California with a teacher, Daniel Lewis, who had been highly recommended and who really set me on a productive path.
Sure.
And my first job, to answer your question, was conducting a youth orchestra right there in Southern California, which I did for 2 years. And that then led to my first professional job, which was assistant conductor of the Honolulu Symphony.
All right. So if you're going to do it in Hawaii, it's not a bad place, right?
That's right. And I was there for 2 years and just loved, of course, the environment. I never wanted to leave. But also the process of making music with people who are at such a high level that you can just show with your hands what you're hoping the music will sound like, and it comes out like that.
And you make it happen, yeah. And you probably learned at that point the importance of the conductor when you could see how the orchestra responds.
Yeah. Yes and no. I mean, because I learned also that when they had let's put it this way, let's see, I don't want to mince words. When they had a bad guest conductor,
yes,
they still sounded great.
Okay, yes, because there's a certain level of talent that will never go away.
Yeah.
And yes,
and
whether the conductor's
we can
there.
never forget that, the conductor doesn't make a sound, hopefully. And it's all of the sound comes from these consummate musicians. And, the best thing that a conductor can do is inspire the musicians to want to give their best. Because when they do,
it all comes together.
There's nothing better.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, and so I guess now we'll fast forward to today. You've been with West Michigan Symphony for 22 years.
Yeah, amazing.
Which is, I think, the longest or second longest tenure in the 85 years history of the West Michigan Symphony. But you also are with the Joffrey Ballet in Chicago and the Mobile Symphony Orchestra,
That's true.
correct?
That's
so
true.
what does a day in a life look like of kind of balancing those three orchestras?
And I will add to that the Chicago Philharmonic Orchestra, which for years and years was the orchestra of the Joffrey Ballet.
Okay.
But now it's separate, so that is yet another organization that I'm working with.
Oh my goodness.
So what's a day in the life?
So there, or for instance, and I'm just asking you this to share with the listeners. I may know some of it, but
Sure.
if someone has a concert on the same night, or how do you arrange seasons so that you can be at the most shows for a certain orchestra, that type of thing?
Right, exactly. Well, I think everybody shows a little bit of flexibility, which I am extremely grateful for. And I'm not one of those people that has like a personal agent or manager. I do have, a manager who helps me to book guest conducting jobs. But I don't have someone saying, okay, Scott, this is what you're doing today.
Yeah, personal assistant.
I don't have
type.
a personal assistant.
Yep.
I know many people who do. I really don't. I like kind of knowing what it is that I have coming up, and I'll look ahead at the month or the week ahead and plan accordingly. But to answer your question, there comes a very stressful time every season. It's usually around August or September, where we start to plan when are the concerts going to be in the following season,
Sure.
a year
ahead,
or a year and a half ahead. And that's when some negotiation happens. It's really negotiating me with myself. It's like, okay, let's say the West Michigan Symphony and the Mobile Symphony, which both have a similar number of concerts. If I'm going to miss any, it can't be all with one orchestra, right?
Right.
So then we say, okay, let's get a guest conductor here for one concert and a guest conductor there for one concert.
Sure.
And then that works out really well.
Perfect. And you feel, and at this point, you feel like you're handling it well, right?
At this point, I do. Now, the thing that's very interesting is that every place that I'm working with, I guess you can be a victim of your own success. They've grown and they all want to do more.
There's more opportunities.
There's more opportunities. So, and probably the trickiest of all is every December, I conduct the Nutcracker for the Joffrey.
Oh, yeah.
And that takes up pretty much the whole month. And so I call this negotiation. This is just the way it's worked out, though. I've negotiated with myself that every other year I'll do the Christmas concert here, and miss a week of conducting for ballet. And then every other year, I'll do a Christmas concert somewhere else and miss a week of conducting for ballet.
Right.
And everyone seems to be, if not okay with it, at least come to some kind of peace.
It's working, yes. At this point, it is what it is, right? Yeah, good.
It's working.
Well, I mentioned that this is the 85th season of the West Michigan Symphony here in Muskegon, so that's a big deal.
It's a very big deal.
And the organization is very much an anchor of our community, I think, an arts anchor particularly. So I guess, can you tell me maybe what's a highlight for you from this season, whether it's happened already? I know we just started the season, or upcoming. What's a high point or two about this season?
Right. You know, and there are many, and the reason that there are many is that I get to, along with some extremely intelligent colleagues at the symphony office, I get to choose what we play. And I once saw a cello case, standing backstage while the orchestra was on stage. The cello case was covered with bumper stickers, and one of them said, "So much music, so little time." And
that's how you feel.
And that's how I feel. But what's good about that is that means that we don't choose anything to play that we don't really love. And so that makes every concert a highlight. But as an example, as we're recording this, the upcoming concert for this week includes Gershwin's An American in Paris. And we're bringing in this fantastic pianist, Claire Huangxi, to play 2 concertos. She's playing the Ravel G Major Piano Concerto, which owes a lot to Gershwin, by the way, in jazzy style. And also a Piano Concerto in 1 movement by Florence Price, which we've never played before. I always like to do something we've never done before, if possible, in every concert. And Claire, by the way, was here once before during the pandemic when we were recording our concerts on stage, everyone wearing a mask, everyone distanced and separated, nobody in the audience. We broadcast it later as a video to subscribers, and Claire came and played the Beethoven Emperor Concerto, and we did it with just strings and timpani. So all of the woodwind and brass parts got incorporated into the strings.
Wow.
That way everybody could wear a mask, right?
Yep.
And including Claire. And so, it's like, wow, I'm going to get to see your face this time.
Oh, that's exciting. Well, and I'm sure she's a lovely face. And I'm sure anytime you can see, but I think when you watch musicians too, that's part of what I love as an audience member, is watching their faces and seeing the expressions and seeing how they feel about the music.
Right. And by the way, I should say, you didn't ask this, but I'll say.
Please, yes.
Every orchestra that I work with has a very different personality, and every community that they play in has a very different personality. And so what I'm aiming for in my working with the musicians is different in each place. So as an example, take the Mobile Symphony and the West Michigan Symphony, both of which have grown tremendously and are in communities of people that I love. But the character is very different. So the audience in Mobile is a party town. They invented American Mardi Gras. They were the first ones to do it. Everyone owns a tuxedo for that reason, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
They're going to a Mardi Gras ball, and they like nothing more than a great party. And they see, and I say they, by and large, the audience sees a concert as an opportunity to celebrate. It's a musical party. And, they love to just jump up and yell bravo at the end.
Okay, sure.
All of that. Here in West Michigan, as everybody listening knows, people are very thoughtful and reserved, tend to be more reserved. You don't have a whole lot of extroversion in the audience or the orchestra. You don't have that many people who are doing their best to call attention to themselves. It's much more inward and inner.
Midwestern.
Yeah, upper Midwestern especially, right? You have people coming from Germany and Scandinavia and so on. And as a result, even though we may have an extremely warm and even enthusiastic reception to a concert, what's much more likely to happen is that we'll have warm and polite applause, and then afterwards someone will come up to me and say, "That concert changed my life. That this was one of the most meaningful experiences I've ever had." This is
very stoically.
Yeah, but how amazing, right?
Yeah.
That we can
they're
have
moved
that
just the same.
That they're moved. And I'm not sure, when I conduct elsewhere and they're extremely enthusiastic, whether that concert stays with them for weeks and months like it seems to here, which is cool. And the same goes for the orchestra. So, in my experience in Berlin, where I saw the orchestra moving and breathing and cueing each other and, being 100% physically involved in the music making while they're playing, that's something that you see a lot less of in the Midwest. And that's something that I have really, really been enthusiastically pursuing during my entire 22 years here, because I see that as my goal in my mind. It's the vision. Whereas, let's say working down in Mobile, there are other things that I'm aiming for, because that part they do already. You see what I mean?
Yep. That has already come naturally to them.
Yeah.
And I know when you conduct, you're physical. You're almost dancing with the music.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Well, no, I mean, it's noticeable. And I think also one of the other things that stands out about you that's kind of a well-known is just how you connect with the audience. You're very personable. The back and forth that you have kind of at the beginning of the show or just leading up to each piece really just gives the audience a little nugget to either, whether they know the music or it's brand new to them, to kind of something to connect with or look for while the orchestra is playing. Wow. And I think that's special about what you do in Muskegon.
Well, thank you. Yeah. You're leading me to want to say two things.
Yeah.
And one of them has to do with, I guess when I say, my very favorite thing to do is conducting, my second favorite thing is talking about music. And what it boils down to is, it would be the exact same thing if you loved a particular brand of beer that the other person had never tried before, and you want to explain to them why you think it's so great. And I mean, the main thing is, here, taste it.
Sure,
right?
Of course, yes.
But can you taste, the particular way the hops taste, or the way this was aged maybe, or whatever. And it's the same with the music. I want to make sure that everyone listening to the music feels as in love with it as I do. And if the music, for example, Berlioz' Symphonie Fantastique, tells the story of somebody who has an opium overdose and has a crazy hallucination and dream, and as part of the dream, he imagined that he's been sentenced to death and he's been marched to the scaffold and his head gets chopped off. And you can hear the head bouncing and landing in the basket, all in music. And it's like, if people know that, it's going to completely change the way they listen to the music, because they're listening for those things, and the way that they appreciate it. So that's great.
And it brings some of that visualization, too, of what the composer intended the story to be.
So that's the purpose of talking. But the other thing is that over these years now, you're reminding me that it's decades, that my
Sorry about that.
My conception, no problem. My conception of my goal for the concert is completely different than it used to be. It used to be that I felt I wanted to present the piece of music on a silver platter in the perfect interpretation. That it's not for the purpose of a recording, but I mention a recording because if you were to record it and listen to it later, you'd say, wow, that's one of the best recordings I've ever heard of the piece. It's perfect, right? That was what I was aiming for, very, very definitely at first. And of course, as a result, I don't think it's a coincidence that the quality of music making went up, because we were all aiming for that goal. My goal now is completely different, and it's not that we're leaving a pursuit of quality by the wayside or anything like that, but that becomes a means to an end. And the end is, we want to present an unforgettable experience to the audience. What does that take? So here's something where the result would completely fly in the face of what my original goal was. We played Haydn's Surprise Symphony, and I told the audience, back then, in the middle of the quiet music, when there's suddenly this really loud timpani stroke and huge loud chord from the whole orchestra, that would have been a shock to everyone there. It would have been a real surprise. You can't expect it. Of course, it's impossible to duplicate that nowadays, but I just want you to know that that's the effect that it had on the audience back then. And then, in performance, when we got to that point with the big loud chord, we set off a confetti cannon. And that way the audience could be equally surprised.
Truly surprised.
Now, what's awesome about that is we had this visceral response, and probably 20 seconds of applause. We had to stop the music before continuing. And if you listen to the recording of that, it makes no sense whatsoever. It's like, what's going on? It's
not perfect in the recording. Yeah.
Right. Not only is it not perfect, but the person is like, what, are they really responding just to the fortissimo chord, No, it was the confetti cannon, but we were able to better duplicate the initial response of the audience, and I think that's what it's all about.
And the live music experience was then something that audience probably won't forget.
Right. Another example just like that. At the end of not the past season, but the one before, we played a piece along with Holst's The Planets. We played a piece called Orkney Wedding with Sunrise by Peter Maxwell Davies, and this includes a whole lot of Scottish drinking tunes. And in the middle of the Scottish drinking tunes, Gabe Slimko, our vice president for operations and personnel, comes walking out wearing a bartender's cap with a napkin over his arm and pours a glass of whiskey for me and the concertmaster and himself. And we all, while the orchestra was playing and I stopped conducting, they kept playing a drinking song. We clinked glasses and drank.
I remember that.
And, you know, it's like you're going to hear all kinds of laughter on the recording, right? But it's not about that. It's about the experience. And it totally was in line with what it was the orchestra was trying to get across.
A little bit of theater along with it. Yeah, I love that. Well, so you actually cued me up perfectly. I think you're talking about sort of expanding the expectations of what an audience might think when they're stepping into the Frauenthal. We all know, I think we all have a vision of what a traditional symphony orchestra looks like, plays like, who might be in the audience. And for all intents and purposes, often that is true. Often that lines up. However, I know that the West Michigan Symphony is really being very intentional with programming, with guest artists, to bring music to the stage that maybe we've never heard. The guest artists might have a diverse background that we've never seen on this stage. They might introduce us to the way a way of playing the piano that's beyond the traditional. And I know that this is, like I said, it's very intentional, but it's also meant to say, okay, if we know that our traditional audience might be kind of aging out too, how do we bring some of this excitement into the music that might continue to feed new audiences also?
Right. And you've seen this because you've been involved with the West Michigan Symphony in one way or another for 11 years, I guess.
Quite a while.
11 years.
Yep.
You first worked in the office and you were on the board of the Block, our small intimate performance space. And we've always seen you as a huge and very active supporter of the symphony. So,
well, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. But, it's true that it's good sometimes to have new and novel ways of giving the audience an experience. Talking before a piece is a good thing. I generally always will do that in every concert. And by the way, I talk to the audience as if everyone is very intelligent. They might just not know this one thing, you know. And that was also the purpose of writing classical music for dummies and opera for dummies.
Yes.
Which is
best-selling author. Forgot to add that to your bio.
I don't know about that, but it's probably the best-selling music book just because of the reach that the Dummies series has.
Yep.
Anyway, the point of all of this is to expand people's enthusiasm for music. But what I did want to say is the age, quote, aging of the audience it's a myth, because the audience was aging, and oh my God, what are we going to do? That's what people said in the 1930s.
Oh, sure. And it's been a constant.
It's been a constant. Now, what is different, though, is the attention span required for the entertainment of our age, which really is different. Like, even in let's say in the 1930s, even though it was mostly middle-aged and older people who would come to concerts, because the kids were gone, the kids were out of the house, and they suddenly had time for something, right? I understand that for a certain part of the audience, that's the situation that leads them to the symphony. And for another part of the audience, they're enthusiastic about classical music from youth, and they will come, starting in their teens or even younger. But I recognize that, in the 1930s, let's say you weren't a music person, but you would still get your entertainment by watching a 2.5-hour movie or going to the theater. And now entertainment is in 20-second blips on TikTok. And it's harder to get people to focus for 2 hours.
2 hours, yep.
So how has that affected us? Well, first of all, sometimes we play shorter pieces. Sometimes we have a shorter concert. We have experimented with concerts that are an hour and 15 minutes with no intermission, and then it's over, type of thing. And there is a certain group in the audience that says, yeah, that's what we prefer. But others say, no, we want to, we came here for an evening. We want to lose ourselves in the music, and we want that experience to last longer. So for now, we're still doing longer concerts. But anyway, to your point, I do recognize that audiences have changed, but the fear of audiences going away because they're, quote, aging out or, to say it even less politely, dying off, as I've heard people say, all throughout the country. That just hasn't been borne
Good.
out with the fact.
What about making it, I know it's important to the symphony to make it a welcoming environment to everyone within our community,
Yeah.
Regardless if you've been raised with symphony music or if you have never stepped foot inside the Frauenthal. What about, can you touch on that?
Yeah. And by way of an example, let me talk about an Italian meal I had some 10 years ago or more. I was with my brother in Washington, D.C., and we went to this old family Italian restaurant that my brother had heard about. And it was just this wonderful old world experience because the way the place was decorated really made you feel like you had stepped into Italy of, 50 years ago. And the food was great. But it wasn't like nouvelle cuisine of any kind. It was good old fashioned eggplant parmesan or chicken parmesan, and it was very filling. And then at the end, they came up and said, "Well, where are you staying?" And I said, DuPont Circle area of DC. They said, "Okay, Frank will drive you home." What? So my brother and I get in this car, and Frank from the family drove us home.
All right.
And was super nice about it. And what happened, and I don't know if they do that for everyone or if they even can when they're so full, because it was toward the end of the evening and it was quiet. But what that did was it extended our experience. Our experience of this restaurant lasted all the way until we got home. And, we've been looking at ways, how can we make it so from the moment that someone even decides to go to a concert, that they have an experience. And, what we're doing is, for example, creating little video snippets that people can watch online where I talk about the music for the concert. And from the moment that they walk into the Frauenthal, it's an extremely welcoming environment. And at the end, we have something in the lobby where, convivial time together, people can enjoy each other and talk to the guest artist and me if I'm there. I feel that we are really trying to create a whole evening or afternoon's experience. And that is in contrast to what happened in the 20th century with classical music. Classical music is sometimes still seen as elitist, right? And that is totally the fault of the classical music world itself. Nobody but the classical music world said, "Oh, you have to have a certain degree of decorum and education and, God forbid, be of a certain race or whatever to enjoy what we have to offer. And therefore, we're not going to speak from the stage. That would be blaspheming the temple, that kind of thing." And therefore, there was huge attrition in symphony orchestra audiences, not to mention, the kind of music that was being made in the mid-20th century, which, sounds like wailing cats. And there's very little of it that I still would ever want to hear again. Some of it is masterpieces. The Rite of Spring by Stravinsky is a perfect example and needs to be played. But some of it, was part of what John Adams, the composer, kind of presciently termed a blip in the history of music. He said this while it was happening, and he was absolutely right, because now composers are writing beautiful and tuneful music again that you do want to hear a second time, that maybe even has a melody that you can hum and remember. But anyway, the classical music world created this elitist attitude from the time of, let's say, Richard Wagner, mid to late 1800s, all the way up to like 1980 or even later, 2000. And our goal has been to undo that completely. You want to go to a movie? Great. You want to go to, see a basketball game? Great. You want to go to the symphony? Great. In all cases, it's an evening's fun, and you'll probably learn something, and it'll be joyous. That's what we're trying to do.
Oh, I love that. And to tie into that, I know that the vision is to be a catalyst for a music-infused West Michigan.
Yes.
And there's so many ways, in addition to just the traditional orchestra concert on the stage, that the symphony is working on that, especially recognizing that there's not as many people of color that are symphony musicians that are playing on the orchestra stages as there are white people. I'll just say it that way. But knowing our community is made up of people of all different colors, I think the symphony is doing a really good job at working to bring the music into the community where people are and make it open for people to come to the concerts also, whether it's through our tune-up program at Muskegon Public Schools, which is helping to bring string instruments at an earlier age to those students, whether it's $5 student tickets, link-up programs.
The link-up program is where kids spend a whole year learning to play certain tunes on the recorder, as well as learning
the feeder.
And it's a feeder. And then they come in and sit in the audience, and the whole audience plays and the orchestra accompanies them. And we do this for 3 audiences worth of schools, some 3,000 or 4,000 kids, and we do that once a year. And the Link Up program was spearheaded by Carnegie Hall, and it was called Link Up because Carnegie Hall then connected with other orchestras around the country. It started with a pilot group of some 10 orchestras. We happened to be one of the 10 because we expressed our enthusiasm for it. And I am proud to say that the West Michigan Symphony is the only orchestra in the world that has done Link Up every single year it's been offered.
Absolutely.
Only one in the world, and we'll always have that distinction.
And I know that's a proud moment for Karen Vander Zanden, too, who you
Yes.
work with as she's the education director.
Right.
And I think 6 counties of schools, right, come from all over.
Some 40 or 50 schools send
Play
people.
at the Frauenthal, yeah.
And, you said Catalyst for Music-Infused West Michigan. That's, that well because, you've been, for example, you worked on the board of the block when it first started, and our tagline for the block is for the musically curious, right? And in other words, nothing has to do with, saying we're going to indoctrinate you or we're going to teach you the fine art of this or anything like that. It's we're going to show you what we love. And, I just think that is so important that we not somehow express any kind of, disdain for or in any way look down on those that are, coming to experience what we have to offer. So, we just want to offer this experience for everybody. And another one of our goals is to be the most audience-friendly orchestra in America. We're well on our way to that.
And there's all kinds of work going on around that, too, I know.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you can think that we should touch on or that you want to share with the audience? There's a lot more. But.
Yeah, there is a lot more. And I want to thank this audience. One of the things that I say is, in choosing where to work and where to conduct, because there are a lot of opportunities these days, which I'm extraordinarily grateful for. And I recognize that that's not always the case. To be able to make a living 100% in music is amazing.
It's difficult.
Incredible. It's just an incredible gift, and I feel really, really lucky to have that opportunity. But, in choosing the places where I like to make music for the last 22 years, West Michigan has figured heavily in that. And a huge part of that is because I want to like the people that I'm making music for, and turn that around. I want to make music for people that I like. And I just find that this community is full of such warmth and sincerity and good works and, community spirit. And I have to say, as I mentioned earlier, every orchestra is different. Every audience is different. What distinguishes this audience is I've never conducted anywhere where I feel that what we do and what we have to offer is more appreciated than here in West Michigan. I feel the appreciation so strongly, and that is a huge difference from going, anywhere maybe as a guest conductor where you're just doing the gig and people enjoy it and then everyone goes off and forgets it, People come and still talk to me about a concert they heard here 10 years ago that changed their life, and I just want people to know that makes a huge difference, and that's why I've stayed here all these years. And the same goes for our musicians who I absolutely love. I feel such affection for them, and everyone is giving their all at our concerts. That's not something you find everywhere. I want us to be the orchestra of choice for all the musicians in the region because they know when they come here, number one, they're going to have fun. Number two, it's going to be an amazing musical experience for them. And number three, they have an audience in West Michigan that appreciates them like practically no other audience on earth. That's why I'm here.
Oh, Scott. Well, we're certainly grateful that you've stayed in our community this long too, because our orchestra is, it's always been fantastic. And I think that the quality that it's maintained all these years and that it's grown into is just amazing, and certainly is heavily thanks to your leadership also. And like you mentioned, the musicians that come from near and far to play with this orchestra.
Yeah.
We have people flying in from Florida and Chicago, and it's just, I think people don't realize that this is a professional orchestra. This isn't just everyone here lives down the street from you. No, they're choosing to come to Muskegon to play here.
I think of it as a jewel box. I keep saying that we handpick jewels from all over the world, and they come here, and then if they then move away, move to some far-flung part of the country, if they can, they continue to play with us. And so that's why we have a musician from Florida, John Holden, our principal clarinetist, who did live in Michigan for many years. When he left, he quit all his jobs in Michigan except the West Michigan Symphony. And, so to be able to continue to attract musicians from all over to create these wonderful musical experiences, that's a gift too.
Wonderful. Well, Scott, thank you. I just want to give a shout out to Andy Belo, fellow Rotarian, who is, of course, the CEO of the West Michigan Symphony, and Sarah Muskegon, who also plays violin, and she's a Rotary member also.
Fantastic.
So just
and I
wanted
have to
give
say
credit.
That, they're part of the nerve center, and decisions are generally made with their input. And in addition to Andy, I have to mention Gabe Slimko, our vice president for operations, who does it all, just absolutely does it all.
Yep.
And our whole staff is stellar. It's small but mighty. But these are the people with whom, I'm making decisions every day. And there's not a day that I wake up and don't think, what can we do for the West Michigan Symphony?
Well, thank you, Scott. Grateful that you're here today. And with that, I think we're going to wrap up. And I want to say thank you to Scott for being on our Muskegon Rising podcast. I would love to share the website for the West Michigan Symphony if anyone's interested in future concerts. It's westmichigansymphony.org, nice and easy. And Scott is here for most of the concerts conducting, and we're grateful. Again, this is a concert week when we're recording right now, and we're grateful that he's shared this time with us. There's lots more to learn about the symphony. If you're interested, visit the website or feel free to reach out to me or Andy Belo. Thank you so much.